Antarctica has always been the quietest continent on Earth. A white, motionless desert where the wind seemed to drag away secrets that should never be discovered. But in July 1972, that silence was broken by an anomaly that would forever change the human understanding of its own history. The ice-penetrating radar installed on the Aurora 4 station had a simple operation: send pulses downwards, measure the depth of the ice, and identify natural cavities or unknown geological structures. Operators knew they would find ancient tunnels, underground lakes, and perhaps even meteorites buried for thousands of years. Nothing more than that. But at 2:11 a.m. that morning, the monitor began to show something impossible. The screen exhibited a triangular shape with perfect angles, totally regular, buried more than 1,000 meters deep. It was not a natural formation. It was not an inverted mountain. It wasn't a compressed block of ice. It was a structure, too big to be a geological deposit, too symmetrical to be a coincidence of nature, too deep to be a human work. The shift operator, Richard Howes, frowned. He recalibrated the radar, adjusted the frequency, and restarted the system 3 times. Each time the pulses came back, the image became clearer. The geometric shape stood out against the background of the ice. Howes called the station commander. "Sir, I think we found an artificial object." The commander did not believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. The shape was undeniable. A giant, perfectly aligned pyramid, with 3 faces exposed and the 4th facing deep into the ground. The same inclination, the same angle, the same geometric signature of the pyramids of Egypt. But there was one detail that made it all the more absurd. By the measurements of ice stratification, that structure had been buried there for at least 12 million years, long before human beings existed, long before any civilization built stone upon stone. The commander ordered absolute secrecy. No external communication, no report, nothing. But before the data was blocked, the radar recorded something that left everyone in shock. The pyramid emitted an extremely faint, almost imperceptible thermal signature, as if it were hot. Not hot like a powered machine. Warm as a living body in hibernation. The American government was immediately activated. In less than 60 hours, the station was surrounded by military helicopters, research ships, scientists, engineers, and an entire division of the NSA specializing in sensitive archaeological phenomena. None of these groups had an official name. The ice began to be drilled by special thermal drills, capable of opening vertical tunnels kilometers deep. The process was accelerated for reasons that no one explained. Hale, drafted in as a military security supervisor, noticed something strange as soon as he arrived. The atmosphere of the operation was unscientific. It was urgent, scared. Many of the agents seemed nervous, as if they already knew what was buried there. The drilling lasted 3 days. When the tunnel finally met the top of the structure, the cameras sent showed the surface of the pyramid for the first time. It was not stone. It wasn't ice. It was a black, polished metal with no corrosion. Despite being buried millions of years ago, the material reflected the light from the lanterns as if it were a liquid mirror. Hale stared at the image. "This is not natural construction," said one of the engineers. "That's advanced manufacturing. Everything there was too perfect. I need it too much. It was impossible for a human civilization to have built that. It is even more impossible that an alien civilization would have specifically come to Antarctica to build something so similar to the pyramids of Egypt." But then the question arose that no one wanted to verbalize. If the Pyramid of Egypt is newer, so who copied whom? As they argued, a second anomaly appeared. Around the pyramid, the ice had microcracks lined up, as if the structure emitted constant vibrations. Vibrations as old as the ice that hid it. It was as if it were pulsating, breathing. Hooray! At the control center, a young geologist approached Hale with an expression that mixed fascination and terror. "Sergeant, you need to see this." He pointed to a spectral reading. The pyramid emitted low-frequency electromagnetic waves. They were not random. They formed patterns, sequences, rhythms, code. "It sounds like language," the geologist muttered. Hale swallowed. "Whose language?" They didn't have time to respond. The tunnel finally opened up enough space for them to download a high-resolution spherical camera. The camera descended, spinning, capturing every detail. When the light from the equipment illuminated the metallized surface, an unexpected phenomenon occurred. The pyramid reacted. Golden lines began to emerge, drawing luminous circuits that ran across the surface like living veins. It was as if the pyramid was awakening from a deep sleep. The light rose and fell, following a cadenced rhythm, a rhythm that resembled a heartbeat. Scientists panicked. Holt yelled at them to disconnect everything. The commander demanded that they stop drilling, but it was too late. The pyramid responded with a shockwave so strong that the ice in the tunnel cracked, shaking the entire station. Screens went out, lanterns failed, equipment shut down simultaneously, and then, through the camera, already turned off, something manifested. A sound, no natural vibration, non-interference. It was a voice, a deep ancestral voice that seemed to echo through the ice, the rock, the metal, and even the bones of those present. One sentence. "Clara, intentional. You shouldn't have woken me up." Hale stood still. The feeling was not just fear. It was as if the entire continent had just opened its eyes, and in that instant he knew. The pyramid was not ruined. It was a capsule. It was prison. It was a cradle. And whatever was inside had just woken up. And that was just the beginning. The discovery made by the Boreal satellite team should not exist. No perfect geometric structure could be buried 4 miles beneath the oldest ice on the planet. No block should emit heat on a continent where the temperature reaches levels capable of cracking steel. And above all, there should not be there, in that white, silent, uninhabited vastness, a building of the same mathematical proportions as the pyramids of Giza. General Andrew Layton knew this as he walked through the icy corridors of Boreal Station Phi, an American underground base camouflaged since 1959 as a weather station. The walls vibrated with the frozen wind outside, and the sound sounded like the roar of a sleeping animal. The feeling of isolation was absolute. And that morning, a new dossier awaited him, one that carried the same classification as the greatest nuclear secrets. When he arrived in the command room, he found the operations lead researcher, Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, organizing maps and thermal charts. She wasn't the kind of person who was easily impressed. He had spent 10 years in volcanic caves in Chile, plus 5 in African deserts hunting for prehistoric records that no one believed existed. "But what did you see in Antarctica?" took the floor from her. "General," Evelyn said without taking her eyes off the holographic images, "this is not a natural formation, nor is it some modern structure hidden by ice. That was here before us, much earlier." Layton folded his arms. "Speak clearly, Doctor." "This pyramid," she began, taking a deep breath, "is between 3 and 5 million years old." The phrase hung in the air like an impossible weight. The general walked to the table. Evelyn magnified the thermal image taken by the experimental drilling carried out 2 days earlier. The contours were perfect, 4 triangular faces forming a clear figure, aligned exactly to the geographic and magnetic pole. The ratios were 1:1.618, the golden number. The same mathematical signature as the Egyptian monuments, but the difference was in the material. No known mineral produced that thermal signature. It was as if the pyramid generated its own heat constantly, like a living organism maintaining homeostasis. Layton ran his hand over his chin. "You're saying that, was this built? By whom?" Evelyn took out another hologram. It wasn't thermal imaging. It was a deep, penetrating radar record. "For something," she replied. "Something that knew exactly what it was doing." The walls of the structure were so dense that they seemed to block electromagnetic waves, almost like a shield. Only an extremely thin beam passed through the material and revealed something deeper, an inner chamber, rectangular, symmetric, and with an energy source that pulsed at precise intervals. Layton narrowed his eyes. "Is this active?" "It's awake," Evelyn replied. That's the most appropriate term. A heavy silence filled the room. It was a kind of silence that betrayed fear. Not hysterical fear, but the rational calculation that something much greater and much older was about to make contact. Evelyn pulled out a yellow envelope, sealed. General, before coming here, I was instructed to consult the archaeological integration files of international agencies. Almost everything was denied, of course. But a document escaped. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet printed with symbols that did not belong to any modern language. They were curved, repetitive characters, intertwined like geometric serpents. At the footer, a Soviet stamp from 1943. The translation made by linguists who disappeared during the Second World War read, "Those who sleep under the ice are those who came before the first civilization." Leighton took a deep breath. Is this a Siberian text? No, Evelyn said. This was found on a Nazi expedition in Antarctica during the war. The mission was testing experimental magnetic excavation equipment. They recorded fragments of walls with symbols identical to these, and then they disappeared. The general approached the table. How did they disappear? They literally disappeared. The whole team. The Nazis abandoned the project. After that, the Soviets tried to retake it. They also had losses. Finally, they gave up completely in 1951 and classified everything as an unknown threat. Leighton rubbed his face. So we're not the first to find that. No, Evelyn replied. Only the first to have enough technology to see what's inside without dying in the attempt. The general was silent. The monitors behind them showed data on temperature, pressure, and seismic waves. There was slight seismic activity coming from the pyramid area. Not ordinary tremors, but periodic vibrations, as if the structure was responding. Evelyn pointed to the screen. Look at this. Since we drilled the ice above the pyramid, the frequency of vibration has increased by 34%. It means that our drilling... Did you pay attention to that? Asked Leighton. Yes, Evelyn said. I think that... He realized that someone was trying to get to him. Leighton paced up and down the room. If it's some kind of alien reactor, we have catastrophic risk. If it's a tomb, replied the doctor, we have an even greater risk. The general stopped in the middle of the room. Do you really believe that this is pre-human civilization? Evelyn didn't look away. General, this structure is older than any anatomically modern human being. Older than higher primates. Older even than continents as we know them today. She held up another image. It was a blurry photograph, corroded by time. It showed something that looked like a pyramid wall, but with sculptures. Sculptures that, unbelievably, resembled modern human faces. It doesn't make sense, Leighton muttered. I know, Evelyn said. But the traces are there. Nose, eyes, chin, almost perfect. But there are subtle differences. Angles, proportions. It's like previous versions of us. A shiver ran through the general. It's suggesting that we were modeled or copied, she replied, unblinking. Leighton stared at the images. Suddenly, the overwhelming feeling hit him. This was not just archaeology. It wasn't just science. It was an encounter with something that existed before humanity, and perhaps that humanity was inspired by him. The general looked at Evelyn. Let's go down. She took a deep breath. So it will be the biggest scientific risk in history, Leighton replied with a cold firmness. Or it will be the last chance to understand who we were before we existed. The elevator did not appear to have been built by human engineers. That was the first impression that Dr. Adrian Keller had the moment he stepped inside the narrow metal platform, illuminated by white lights that did not emanate from ordinary lamps. They seemed to come from the very material of the walls, as if the surface emitted light of its own accord. The initial metallic sound, as the doors closed, echoed through the entire structure, as if the pyramid was breathing before swallowing its visitors. The temperature inside was too stable for an underground environment. No cold currents, no condensation, no humidity. Only that dense, almost solid silence that slowly crushed the human mind. The descent team, Keller, archaeologist Elena Moreau, geologist Malik Wen, and 2 military men accompanied by Colonel Hayes, stood motionless, watching the cables descend at constant speed. The platform vibrated softly, as if it were being guided not by machines but by something that knew every inch of that structure. The depth increased by the second. 10 meters, 20, 50, 100. The light up there has completely disappeared, replaced only by the phantom glow of the pyramid's inner walls. Even the military, trained for extreme environments, showed evident discomfort. It was like descending into the throat of something colossal, something that had been dormant for an incalculable time. And now perhaps he was waking up. At 120 meters, the elevator slowed down, not with jerks, but with an unsettling softness. The platform landed on some kind of smooth floor, so polished that it reflected the diffused light as if it were frozen water. The doors opened slowly, releasing a low-pitched sound that sounded more like an architectural moan than moving metal. What stood before them did not resemble the narrow corridors of the Egyptian pyramids. It was a gigantic hall, with wide columns that rose so high that they disappeared into the darkness. The architecture resembled ancient Egypt, yes, but in a distorted, exaggerated way, as if they were prototypical, older, more primitive, or more advanced versions, impossible to date with any earthly logic. Carved symbols covered the walls, serpentine shapes, double triangles, and spirals connected to elongated eyes. Elena approached. The touch of her fingertips barely brushed the surface, and she immediately recoiled. The stone was hot. Impossible. That place should be at -10 degrees. That doesn't make sense, Elena murmured. This heat cannot be natural. Hayes stepped forward, looking around with gun drawn. Everyone, keep your position. This place is not stable. Keller disagreed internally. It was not unstable. He was alive. It didn't move like a cave, and it didn't creak like ice under tension. It was an organized silence, deliberate, observer. And no matter how much he fought against this idea, he couldn't shake the feeling that the entire pyramid was staring at them. To the right, a narrow passage seemed to lead even deeper. Malik analyzed the walls with portable instruments. The mineral here, it is not common. I don't recognize the composition. It looks like basalt, but it's not basalt. It looks like sandstone, but it's not sandstone. It's as if it had been molded into a liquid state, then hardened, for something we don't know. Hayes cut off. We're wasting time. Advance. The hallway was long and perfectly straight. No curve, no division, no detour. The walls displayed repeated symbols that formed fractal patterns, creating a hypnotic sensation. With each step, the air warmed up a little more. Nothing that happened there obeyed the normal rules of Antarctica. Nothing. About 300 meters from the entrance to the hall, they came to a massive door, formed by 2 triangular plates that met in the center like giant leaves. The door seemed to have been built for something much bigger than human beings. Elena analyzed the symbols carved there. Egyptian hieroglyphics were almost crude copies, childish versions, of what was in front of them. These symbols, they predate Egypt. Much earlier, Elena said, her voice almost trembling. Egypt copied that. He copied this style. But how? That's impossible, Keller added, unless human civilizations have seen this before. Long before recorded history. Malik knocked on the door. The central symbol, an elongated eye with a vertical pupil, lit up gold. Not strong, but enough for everyone to retreat 2 steps. Colonel Hayes aimed the gun instinctively, as if he could shoot at the light. The door began to move, not with tremors, not with trancos. Come fluidity. The plates slid sideways, revealing a circular room illuminated by a golden light that had no source. It was light without a lamp, light without fire, light that seemed to emanate from the air itself. The group entered slowly, their weapons raised, their breaths almost synchronized. In the center of the room, there was a pedestal of black stone. It wasn't ornate, it wasn't decorated. It was simple, too simple. About him, something that made Keller feel his body go cold. It was a mask, a clearly human mask, made of an unknown material, smooth as obsidian but shiny as polished gold. Most disturbingly, the mask was identical to those found in the tombs of pharaohs, but the style was older, much older, and the face portrayed, it could be anyone walking the streets today. No archaic or primitive traits. It was modern human. Perfectly modern. That shouldn't exist, Elena whispered. That's thousands, maybe millions of years older than Egypt. But it represents us. Keller approached. The mask seemed to pulsate, as if it had a heat of its own. He reached out, hesitated, and touched the surface. Instantly, the entire room shook. The walls lit up in light patterns. Symbols began to rearrange themselves. The pedestal emitted a deep, guttural sound, like a whisper. Malik shouted, "Stand back!" But it was too late. The pyramid had awakened, and the first thing she did was recognize Keller, as if he were waiting for someone exactly like him. The staircase that descended to the interior of the pyramid seemed infinite. The walls, sloping like those of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, had perfectly polished blocks, no cracks, no excavation marks. They looked freshly built, even though they had been buried under snow and ice for countless millennia. The air was cold, but not the natural cold of Antarctica. It was a static cold, frozen in time, like the interior of a mausoleum that was never opened. Each step echoed in a silence so deep that it seemed to absorb the sound itself. Colonel James Warwick was ahead, lighting the way with a flashlight equipped with a thermal sensor. The detector marked temperatures that varied in an impossible way. Walls where there should be ice marked 18 degrees Celsius. Holes where there should be solid rock marked 40. It was as if the entire structure obeyed its own laws, not those of the Earth. "This is completely out of scale," muttered Dr. Ingrid Solberg, the expedition's geologist. "That temperature, it is as if the pyramid generated an internal climate." No one answered. Everyone was trying to process what they saw. The staircase ended in a long, narrow corridor with a low ceiling, all covered with carved symbols. They were identical to Egyptian hieroglyphics, but at the same time, different. The overall structure resembled human writing, but each symbol had variations that no Egyptologist could identify, as if they were ancient versions, preliminary models, or prototypes of a language that would only come into existence tens of thousands of years later. This predates Egypt by 100,000 years, and it seems more advanced, said historian Malik Arshad, walking carefully. The corridor ended in a gigantic doorway. It had no doorknobs, no opening points, or anything that suggested a human mechanism. It was a monolith of black stone, polished like obsidian. In the center, a perfect circle, similar to the solar disk in the pyramids of Giza. Colonel Warwick came closer and touched the stone with his fingers, but what happened next made everyone take a step back. The door opened by itself, not with mechanical speed, but as if she were alive, as if he were reacting to human touch. The stone slid sideways with a soft, silent motion, and behind it arose a colossal room illuminated by a golden light that no one could pinpoint the origin of. There were no lamps, torches, or panels. The light simply existed. The team entered, and then they saw the portraits. On the 4 giant walls were rows and rows of images. Some are sculpted in bas-relief, others painted with vibrant pigments and preserved in an impossible way. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and they all had something in common. They were portraits of modern human beings, faces, profiles, eyes, hairs, noses, eyebrows, all perfectly detailed, as if they had been made by contemporary photographers, not prehistoric artists. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone felt the same thing. That could not exist. There was no scientific possibility. There was no rational explanation. Colonel Warwick approached the first mural. It was the face of a young woman, brown skin, light eyes. It seemed so real that it felt like it was going to blink at any moment. Next to it, engraved in unknown symbols, was a sequence of marks, perhaps dates, perhaps coordinates. Dr. Ingrid approached the next mural. An elderly man with a long beard and a serene expression. On the side, the same pattern of recordings. This here, she swallowed hard. This looks like a gallery of records. Records of what? Malik asked, walking from wall to wall, his eyes widening more and more. General Donovan, who until then had maintained a posture of military skepticism, stopped in front of one of the portraits. His eyes widened. He began to tremble. This is impossible. The others approached. The portrait before them showed a figure that everyone immediately recognized. It was the face of General Donovan himself. Identical. Each line, every scar, every detail. And next to the image, the same sequence of symbols. Warwick slowly approached. "Donovan, that's you." The general retreated, staggering, his face as white as snow. "I've never been here before," he said, his voice broken. "That's not possible. This is not..." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone looked at the other walls. Here were portraits of people they had never seen, young, old, children, and men and women of all kinds. But each face had something strange about it. They were faces. Current. Not ancestors. Not primitive. Humans like those who walked the streets in 1964. Dr. Ingrid moved a little further away and found something even more disturbing. On one of the walls there were figures represented in chronological rows. It looked like a sequential mural. When he looked closer, he realized that each image seemed to represent the same person, at different ages, as if they were following her entire life. And at the end of the row, an unfinished portrait, as if he had been interrupted, or as if waiting for something. She pointed out, "This seems forecast." Malik approached another mural. This one did not show portraits, but planets, stars, orbits, and lines connecting faces to celestial positions, as if each person were tethered to a specific point in the sky. A star map. Human. Their catalogs. Malik whispered. "This is a database." They were mapping people. As if they were. He hesitated. No one wanted to complete the sentence, but everyone thought the same. As if they were specimens. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered. A deep vibration ran across the floor. The room looked reactive, as if he were noticing their presence. Dr. Ingrid retreated, alarmed. "This is not a dead file. This room is active." Colonel Warwick felt something icy rise through the cologne. "Activate? How?" Before anyone could answer, the golden light changed hue, getting hotter, as if it was coming to life. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and at the back of the room, behind all the murals, something began to roll. A slow, deep sound, like a sliding stone. A second door was opening, and something was inside. Something that had waited thousands of years. Something that knew they were there. Warwick raised his gun, his face tense, and said only, "Whatever it is, this is not the end of the structure. It's the beginning of it." The corridor seemed endless, but everyone knew they were approaching something. The air had changed. It was no longer just cold. There was a strange density, as if they were walking into a sleeping lung. At the head of the group, the leader of the archaeological team, who until then had only dealt with rock, sand, and predictable ruins, walked in silence. The footsteps echoed in the ancient metal hidden under miles of Antarctic ice. On the right, the mission geophysicist watched the tablet with the readings. On the left, the expert in ancient languages photographed each symbol that appeared on the walls. They had descended through a vertical shaft cut into the ice, then advanced through a tunnel that could not have been opened by any human drilling. Everything was too symmetrical. The inner walls of the underground structure were of an unknown metal alloy, smooth to the touch but marked by inscriptions that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphics. with a detail that none of them could fit into the logic. Some symbols seemed too modern, almost like stylized technical codes. At the end of the hallway, there was a door. Not a stone door, as in Egypt. A solid plate without cracks, fitted perfectly into the gap. No hinge, no handle, just a perfect rectangle of dark material. "There are no cracks," the engineer murmured, passing the scanner once more. "It's as if this was a single piece. But there's a finer point here," the geophysicist said, bringing the flashlight closer. "Look at the marks." Right in the center of the plate, there was an almost imperceptible circle, slightly recessed. Around him, small traces resembling lightning, a symbol of focus, or a warning. If it is an activation mechanism, it can be sensitive to heat, pressure, radiation, commented the engineer. The mission leader took a deep breath. "We are here for that. If this structure is what it appears to be, this door is what they are trying to hide." He took the glove off his right hand, despite the cold, and touched the circle. For an instant, nothing happened. Then the metal turned warm. A deep, deep sound vibrated through the floor, up the boots, the legs, and the spines of everyone there. The plate retreated a few millimeters inwards, then slid sideways, effortlessly, as if it were light. The air that escaped from inside was not old, nor laden with dust. Era neutral. No smell, as if that environment was not abandoned, just waiting. The lanterns lit up towards the interior. No one said anything in the first few seconds. The space beyond the door was a large, circular room with a relatively low ceiling, supported by thin pillars that branched out like ribs. The walls were not smooth. They were covered, of faces, not faces carved in an ancient style, with eyes in profile and Egyptian proportions. Realistic human faces, deeply detailed. Each face had different expressions, ages, and traits. Some looked European, others African, Asian, or indigenous. There was variation in skin, features, and shapes of eyes, mouths, and noses, and none of them belonged to anyone who might have lived in the period when that structure was supposedly built. That doesn't make sense," whispered the language expert, forgetting her role for a moment. "These faces are modern." The geophysicist took a few steps, almost stumbling. "They're not just modern," he corrected. "This one looks like someone I've never seen." He pointed to a face with a thin beard, crooked nose, and scar on his left eyebrow. The archaeologist brought the lantern closer. "Do you know this person?" I don't know. It looks like someone who has been in the news, or on the streets, or..." He couldn't finish it. It was like trying to remember a dream that escapes while we wake up. Each face was framed by a set of symbols. Not complete hieroglyphics, but combinations of lines and dots. Next to each face, traces formed something that resembled simplified constellations, small maps. "It's not just portraits," said the linguist, kneeling to look at one of the sets. "They are coordinated. Each face is associated with a pattern of stars, as if they were markers," added the mission leader. "Maps using people as references." In the center of the room, the floor had a circular recess. Inside it, a flat, dark, perfectly polished surface. When one of the lanterns passed over that point, the surface reacted. Waves of light spread out as if they had thrown an invisible stone into a lake of oil. "Be careful," the engineer warned. This could be some kind of active dashboard. The linguist, however, was already mesmerized by the faces on the walls. She approached one in particular, a child with light eyes, hair tied up, a shy smile, and felt something in her chest. A squeeze, a memory she didn't have. "Do I know you?" he mumbled, not realizing he was speaking out loud. The mission leader began to notice an even more unsettling pattern. "Is anyone noticing that? Are the proportions current? Look at the eyebrows, the haircuts, and the small asymmetries. This is not symbolic style. This is direct observation, as if someone were studying us," the geophysicist added, "as if these faces were samples of an experiment." The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. They weren't in a worship room, not even in a mausoleum. They were in something much colder. A catalog. All around, the symbols in the frames of each face began to react to their presence. Previously faded strokes began to glow in faint tones like freshly scratched matches. The center panel has intensified the interior glow. "The magnetic field is rising," the engineer warned, looking at the readings on her wrist. "Everything is activating at the same time." The leader took a few steps to the center, approaching the dark surface. As he leaned over, he saw his own face reflected, distorted, multiplied, as if several angles of it existed at the same time. Behind his reflection, slowly, other faces began to emerge. Not those of colleagues, other, hundreds, thousands. All the faces of the walls rearranged, overlapping, aligning themselves in invisible patterns. "This is a database," the linguist concluded. "A record of human faces used as a reading grid for something bigger." "Something bigger what?" the geophysicist asked. She hesitated. "Stars." As if responding to the thought, the dark surface of the panel projected out of nowhere, a dome of light that invaded the entire room, transforming the ceiling into an artificial sky. Constellations emerged, lines connecting dots, aligning with the patterns next to each face. Each human being cataloged there corresponded to a specific region of the sky, a star map made with people. The feeling of being watched became suffocating. The mission leader took a step back. Someone at some point was using our image to orient themselves in space. And the part that no one dared to say out loud, but everyone thought about, was inevitable. If this pyramid is older than any known human civilization, who put these faces here before our species existed? The answer would not come in that room, but the question would never go away. The silence inside the underground pyramid was no ordinary silence. It was too deep, too heavy, as if the walls absorbed the sound before it had a chance to exist. "Doctor." Adrian Cole walked slowly, holding the flashlight so tightly that his fingers hurt. Behind him, the team advanced cautiously, each footstep echoing through the corridor made of perfectly carved blocks, so smooth they seemed shaped by machines impossible for any ancient human civilization. Delta Group had retreated after losing 2 men to that unexplained phenomenon that engulfed their bodies in light. Cole knew that this had not been an accident. The pyramid wasn't just buried. She was asleep, and something, somewhere was trying to wake her up. Or they themselves were doing it without realizing it. When they reached the end of the main hallway, they found a monumental triangular door. Unlike the others, it was not made of stone, but of a material that resembled obsidian, although it was denser. The surface reflected distorted shapes, like a living mirror. Cole ran his hand slowly across the panel. The door responded to the ring, emitting a soft pulse, like a heart asking to keep knocking. Dr. Helena Vargas approached, examining runes on the sides. "These symbols are similar to those found in Djoser's tomb, but evolved, as if they were an older version, paradoxically more advanced." Cole watched the wall carefully. "They didn't copy the Egyptians copied them." A deep crack reverberated down the hallway. The triangular door began to slide sideways, exposing a dark room whose depth was impossible to measure. Before they could react, faint lights, like blue fireflies, began to light up on the ceiling of the chamber, revealing details of an environment that did not look like a tomb, but a laboratory. Polished stone benches were arranged in concentric levels. In the center, there was a metallic altar with golden lines running across the surface. The moment they stepped into the chamber, sensors hidden in the walls woke up. Columns of light rose from the floor, revealing carved figures throughout the room. They are human faces, but not from any known period. Perfect features, exact proportions, serene expressions. Men, women, and children. Faces that looked like portraits but were shaped thousands of years ago. Helena touched one of them with a trembling hand. "These figures, they look like real people." Cole leaned in, analyzing the precision of the details. "They are not artistic representations. Healthy records, as if these people had been scanned." An intense cold took over the room. It was not natural. It was targeted. It was an answer. The pyramid was waking up. With each step towards the central altar, the air seemed denser, as if it were vibrating at a low frequency. Cole felt pressure in his ears and realized that everyone was hearing a distant, soft but constant buzz. It wasn't sound. It was information. Something was trying to communicate. When they reached the altar, they noticed that in the center there was a translucent cylinder, suspended by invisible fields. Inside him, a golden light pulsed rhythmically. Helena brought the portable scanner closer. The display turned black, then white. Then he displayed indecipherable characters. This is not possible. The scanner has crashed, but it's trying to translate something. Cole took a deep breath. The pyramid is returning data. The moment he touched the cylinder, the whole room lit up. All the walls, all the symbols, and all the countertops lit up in synchronized patterns, like circuits. The ground shook. Not a seismic tremor, but a soft and rhythmic vibration, as if all the structures there were breathing together. Then the faces carved into the walls began to move, not physically but in projections of light emerging from the sculptures, creating high-fidelity holograms of human beings. Men and women that Cole had never seen but who seemed as real as any living person. The holograms did not speak, they just watched. Helena took a step back. "They're analyzing us." Cole responded with his eyes fixed on the projections. "They're comparing. Compared with whom?" The answer came before he could even finish the thought. One of the projected images changed. Now it showed a modern human face, a man identical to one of the scientists on the team, then another, then another. Faces of living people, people we know and people who have never been there, appearing on the walls as if they had been scanned thousands of years ago. Helena swallowed. They registered us before we even existed." The lights flashed. The central cylinder sped up his wrists. The tinnitus converted into more intense patterns. And then they heard a voice, not through the air, not through the ears. It arose within their minds, as if it had been inserted directly into each one's consciousness. "The lineage has returned." Cole froze. The phrase echoed in his mind as if it had been spoken in his mother tongue, but at the same time in an older, deeper, more primitive language. He held the sides of the table so he wouldn't fall. Helena tried to breathe, but it was as if the air was trapped in her throat. "The lineage has returned," the voice repeated. "You walk on the shadows of the first world." The light of the cylinder intensified until it dazzled. The projections disappeared. The walls returned to their original state, as if nothing had happened. But the cylinder was now open, and in the center of it there was something. Something small, something simple, something impossible. It was a metallic plate, thin as paper, with symbols shining in bright colors. Cole approached and realized that, among the symbols, there was something that should not be there. A map of the Earth, a perfect map, but it did not represent the continents as they are today. It represented how they were millions of years ago. And right in the center of the map, a bright spot marking Antarctica. Helena fell to her knees. They didn't copy the Egyptians. They didn't copy humans. Cole looked at the map and felt his mind break. We copied them. The pyramid was not a tomb. It was not a temple. It was an archive. And at that very moment, the archive woke up. The silence that took over the central room of the pyramid was not just the absence of sound. It was the feeling that the air itself was waiting for a reaction. In the center of the chamber, the star ceiling continued to project slow-moving constellations, while the reliefs on the wall, human faces, lined up as if they were sacred icons, remained illuminated by lines of golden light. And now, no one else on the team could pretend that this was just an archaeological coincidence. "This is not just art," Helena murmured, her voice hoarse. "It's identity." She walked up to one of the sculpted faces. The trace was fine, detailed, and far beyond what any ancient terrestrial civilization could theoretically reproduce at that level. It was a male face, sunken eyes and a scar on his left eyebrow, seemed recent, alive. One of the analysts approached a portable scanner. The numbers appeared on the display, and he swallowed. "Doctor, the facial symmetry, the bone pattern, the cranial proportion. This is human. Modern human. There is no relevant structural difference in relation to us." Helena already knew. Ever since he had laid eyes on the first of these faces, he had felt something tighten in his chest. Until then, she managed to cling to the idea that they were symbolic representations, gods, archetypes. But science does not forgive comfort. The anatomical precision said something else. "How many faces like these have we mapped out?" he asked. 73, replied the analyst. "And some are repeated." That word, "they repeat," hung in the air like a blade, because it didn't make sense. Who would sculpt the same face over and over again on different walls, with slight variations? The obvious answer was disturbing. They were not portraits in the artistic sense. They were records, samples, perhaps versions. At the far end of the room, Colonel Foster watched everything in silence, arms crossed, with the closed expression of someone who had already decided that none of this would see the light of day. He was not interested in truths. He was interested in control. "And the coordinates?" he asked, pointing to the ceiling. The star projector had changed since the activation of the central mechanism. Now, instead of just showing a static sky, he drew trajectories. Points of light moved in curved trails, linking certain faces on the walls to specific stars in the projection. A pattern was forming, a kind of dynamic map between human faces and points in the cosmos. The team's astrophysicist, Lazaro, approached the console that decoded the pattern. His fingers trembled over the controls. "This here, if you're right, it is not a simple map," he said. "It's an index." "Index of what?" Helena asked, although she already feared the answer. "Of origin." She approached. On the screen, Lazaro had assigned colors to the roots. Some linked the same face to more than one star system. Others showed multiple faces connected to the same point of light. It was not static, it was historic, temporal. That's telling us that these humans, he pointed to one of the faces, appeared there. He pointed to a bright star on the map. Before they appeared here, Helena felt a chill on the back of her head. "You're saying that this pyramid records human migrations outside Earth?" Lazarus hesitated. "Not only outside, before Earth." The word "before" tore something inside her. Archaeology had always dealt with the deep past, but within a comfortable limit. Everything, in the end, happened here. The planet was the stage, the cradle and the coffin. Now, that map suggested another narrative. The human being was not an exclusive product of the Earth's soil. Era, a scattered pattern. Repeated, replicated. That knocks everything down, someone murmured in the back. Mythology, history, religion, biology. Helena felt the colonel approaching, his presence like a solid shadow on her shoulder. "You two," he said, staring at Helena and Lazarus, "will erase all this from the reports. No cosmic origin, no index of humanity. This here will be cataloged as a prehistoric ritual structure with no biological relevance." "You must be joking," Helena replied, turning to face him. "Do you see the same as me? This pyramid is older than our known civilizations, perhaps older than the human species itself, and it shows our faces next to mapped stars. The world needs to know this." The colonel's eyes hardened. The world doesn't need to know anything it can't bear. The sentence fell as a sentence, but Helena didn't even blink. "This isn't about putting up with it. It's about truth. Too much truth brings down empires, Doctor, and I work to keep them standing." He signaled to one of the military technicians. "Start scanning all devices. Every recording goes straight to the high command. No local copying, no personal record." The technician nodded, already connecting cables and initiating encryption protocols. Lazarus took a step back and looked at Helena, and she saw the fear mixed with the indignation in his eyes. That was how great discoveries died. Not for lack of proof, but for excess of interest. Still, there was something the colonel could not control. Something he didn't have the tools to delineate. What that pyramid was doing now. Because, while they were arguing, the map on the ceiling kept moving. Some routes shone brighter, others disappeared, and for the first time, a point of light began to flicker out of the pattern, far from the original trajectories, in a dark region of the sky. Helena noticed first. "This is new," he said, pointing. "I wasn't there before." Lazarus ran to the console, trying to recalibrate, but the data was clear. That point of light represented a real-time signal. "It's not an old record," he explained, swallowing hard. "It's currently broadcasting. Someone is responding." "Answering what?" Foster asked, annoyed. Helena stared at the walls, the faces, and the central pillar that still pulsated as if pumping something invisible underground. "Responding to the fact that we opened this. One of the reliefs has changed in intensity. A woman's face, previously only illuminated, now seemed to cast a shadow of its own. For a moment, Helena had the distinct impression that the sculpted pupils were deeper, darker, more attentive. She felt her throat dry out. "Colonel, do you really think you can silence this?" he asked in a low voice. "This here was not built to be a secret. It was built to be found. And now that it's gone, whoever is on the other side knows that we have come this far." Foster did not immediately respond. His silence was no doubt. It was a calculation. He didn't fight the truth. He fought the fact that he had lost control of it. After a few seconds, he said, "We will close the access. We will seal the entrance. We will bury everything again. If they took so long to find, they can wait a few more centuries." Helena laughed, a short, humorless laugh. "Do you think we were the ones who found them?" "No. It was this thing that allowed itself to be found." She looked again at the ceiling. The new point of light was no longer alone. Others began to blink. Few, but enough to form a timid line in the dark. One route. "They already know," she concluded. "And if this pyramid is an index, then we are not the only faces cataloged. The question is no longer whether we are going to tell the world this." She turned to the colonel, facing him firmly. "The question is whether the world will have time to react before anyone follows this map. Back to us." Foster took a deep breath. "There will be no world if panic begins," he replied. "So, Doctor, the truth is here, on this ice, in this basement." Helena felt a strange calm when she heard him, because at that moment she finally understood what that pyramid held. It wasn't just proof that we weren't the first. It was proof that we were part of a series, of an experiment, from a catalog. And catalogs, they are for consultation. Whether the colonel allowed it or not, someone, somewhere, was already opening that index on the other side. The team's auxiliary power generator finally stabilized, illuminating the walls of the final chamber again. But that light, white, technical, human, seemed too dim next to the golden glow that pulsed on the ceiling of the pyramid, as if the structure was waking up. Each pulse made the floor vibrate under the researchers' boots. It was impossible to tell if that was energy or a beat. Dr. Elias Voss stood before the newly opened colossal door. He knew that after that, there would be no return. The air was warmer than at any previous point in the pyramid. Although they were more than 2 kilometers under the ice, the humidity was too high. The oxygen is too dense, as if the chamber produced its own climate, or as if something inside it simply ignored the natural rules of the earth. Behind him, Dr. Rowe. Miriam Havel held a trembling clipboard. The radiation increased again. "And the biological sensors are," she hesitated, "they're showing activity. Organic." "Organic?" turned Elijah, incredulous. "Inside a structure more than 10 million years old?" Before he answered, the glow on the ceiling pulsed brighter, and the sound everyone had feared returned. A deep, deep whisper, like the slow breathing of a giant animal asleep, or about to awaken. The entire team instinctively retreated a few steps, but Elijah advanced. The final chamber wasn't just dark. It was immense, so big that the light seemed to be swallowed before it touched the walls. He walked carefully, and each step echoed dozens of times as if the space were deformed. The feeling was not of being inside a place, but within an organism. In the center, a structure different from the others. It was not a wall, nor a panel, nor a sculpture. It was a crystalline, translucent pillar with golden veins spiraling through it, like petrified nervous systems. The heat came from there. "This is not equipment," whispered Miriam. "Yes, a body." The phrase hung in the air, heavy, wrong, and real. Elijah approached the pillar. "The whole structure, it is a receptacle. The pyramid is not a monument. It's a cell." The crystal reacted. A wave of light traveled through the inner veins, descending to the base. The team's sensors started beeping wildly. The ground shook. The temperature rose almost 10 degrees in seconds. And then, the crystal has changed. The outer surface began to liquefy like ice in the sun, first forming droplets, then revealing a silhouette inside. Human, but impossible. Tall and thin, with proportions too elegant to be earthly. The face was covered by a metallic mask that resembled the shape of a stylized falcon, similar to Egyptian symbols, but older, much older. Miriam fell to her knees. "Elijah." "Right. This is the same iconography as the pyramids of Egypt, but thousands of times older," he replied in a choked voice. "We've never built anything. We imitate." The crystal melted completely. The figure made a slow, almost ritualistic first movement. The golden mask reflected the light from the chamber. Something inside the structure exhaled a sound that made the entire mountain tremble. Not a roar, but a wail. The creature raised its head, and then he spoke. Not with his mouth, not with sound, but inside everyone's mind. "The seal has been broken," Havel screamed, holding his head. One of the operators fainted. Elijah felt a crushing weight in his chest, as if he were receiving memories directly into his soul. Images flooded his mind. Ancient cities made of light. Winged beings with animal masks. Firestorms covering continents. Pyramids that were not temples, but capsules. A war so old that it preceded the current shape of the continents. Beings like that falling, one by one, like dying stars. One last command: seal, sleep, wait for the awakening of imitation. Elijah opened his eyes, sweating and dizzy. He knew that humanity would come. Miriam touched his shoulder, terrified. "He's looking at you." The being has advanced one step. Each movement created waves in the air, like thermal distortion. He brought his hand, long, thin, and covered with flexible plates of ancient gold, and rested it on Elijah's shoulder. Elias froze. He heard another phrase in his mind. "You have awakened us, but they are not alone." The ground opened up, a huge crack tearing through the base of the pyramid. A warm wind rose, carrying fine sand that shouldn't exist in the Antarctic ice. A golden light emerged from the depths. Miriam, desperate, cried out, "We have to get out, now!" The creature raised its face to the ceiling as if it were hearing something in the distance, and then he spoke the third sentence, the most terrible. "The other chambers are responding." Elijah understood immediately. "There are more pyramids." The creature tilted its head. One for every continent that the ancient world had. The crack in the ground burst, expelling glowing fragments like embers. The newly melted pillar began to reform itself behind them again, as if the mechanism was trying to close the cell. The creature looked back at Elijah and said its last sentence before disappearing into the emerging light. "Your era is ending. Ours is starting over." The entire chamber collapsed. The team ran, stumbling, screaming, trying to reach the main tunnel. The entire pyramid seemed to spin inside, as if it was reconstructing itself from old memories. The walls glowed with hieroglyphics that had never been seen on any surface. The air warmed until it burned the skin. When Elijah and Miriam finally emerged in the upper area, the entire mountain shook. Ice and rocks were collapsing. Antarctica roared like an animal being awakened from a forced sleep. The moment they stepped out into the open air, a roar rose from the ground. A golden flash through the ice, illuminating the sky like an underground sunrise. Elijah fell to his knees in the snow. He knew that this was not the end. It was just the beginning, because if that pyramid had awakened, the others would not be long.